And I love history. I love American history as well. And the early framers of the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution, I believe, were providentially guided by God. They came to this land to escape the totalitarian religious oppression of the past. They wanted to found a country without a king and a church without a pope. They wanted a land that had both civil and religious liberty. We remember things like Amendment number 1 of the United States Constitution. Congress shall make no law respecting the establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. And so we think of that, my friends. We think of the freedom that we have, we're reminded of in the Declaration of Independence. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, the Declaration of Independence. Now, my friends, America has freedom of religion. America allows people to worship according to the dictates of their own conscience. This was a land, I believe, providentially raised up by God to spread religious liberty throughout the world and to take the mission and knowledge of Jesus to many, many countries. In fact, many, many missionaries have come out of this land. And beyond the missionaries, a lot of money for mission activity has come out of the United States of America. Can you say amen? So it'd be surprising if the United States were not found in Bible prophecy. Not because it's a nation, not because it's a political entity, but because for one of the first times in human history, a nation was founded upon the principles of democratic freedom and religious liberty combined. And so, you see, the Bible doesn't mention every nation. It's no use to ask, what does the Bible say about Brazil or Poland or is Canada or other nations in Bible prophecy? The Bible is not primarily a history book, and it's certainly not a lesson in geography. It only mentions those nations that have an overall impact upon God's overall plan and what's going on in this world. And so for those reasons, it would be surprising if the United States were not mentioned and found in the book of Revelation and in Bible prophecy. We're in Revelation chapter 13. Revelation chapter 13 here this evening. And we're going to see this. Revelation 13, and we start in verse 1. A brief review, the first beast of Revelation 13. Then I stood on the sand of the sea, and saw a beast rising up out of the sea, having 7 heads and 10 horns, upon his horns 10 crowns, and upon his heads the name of blasphemy. Verse 2, and the beast which I saw was like unto a, what? Leopard, and his feet were as the feet of a, what? Bear, and his mouth is the mouth of a lion, and the dragon gave him his power and seat and great authority. Verse 3, and I saw one of his heads as it were wounded to death, or mortally wounded in your translation there, and its wound was healed, and all the world wondered after the beast. And they worshipped, in verse 4, the dragon which gave power unto the beast, and they worshipped the beast, saying, who is like unto the beast, who's able to make war with him? And then, of course, the beast would speak blasphemy and have power to go 42 months in the next verse, verse 5. And we saw 11 identifying points of this first beast, right? And they're on screen right now. We saw that the Vatican is the power that meets these points. And then, of course, you go right on down, and it says here in verse 9, if anyone has an ear, let him hear. He who leads into captivity shall go into captivity. He who kills with the sword must be killed with the sword. Here's the patience and faith of the saints. This is another reference to that 1798 definitive time when General Berthier was sent by Napoleon Bonaparte to remove Pope Pius VI off the throne at the Vatican, taken to Valence, France, where there he died in a dungeon. He who led into captivity would go into captivity. You see, through the Dark Ages, the kings of Europe were vassal kings to the Vatican, to the Pope. They had to do what the Pope had to say, because them and their whole country was Catholic. If they didn't do what the Pope said, then the Pope would basically say, you don't have a good king, get another one, or even issue an interdict, which is a territorial excommunication. Basically, literally saying you and your whole country can just go to, And so, they would get new kings, there's ways to do that, right? And so, they were vassal kings to the Vatican. Well, he who led into captivity would go into captivity. 1798. A very unique thing that happened in history, where a pope was removed from the Vatican and died in captivity. Then we see something. Are you there? In verse 11. Then I saw a what kind of beast? Another beast rising up out of the earth, and he had 2 horns like a lamb, and he spoke like a dragon. Is this the same beast? No. How do you know? It's called another beast. The first beast came up out of the sea. This beast comes up out of the earth. The first beast had how many horns? 10. This one has 2. Okay, there are several things that we should notice as we begin to look here at this first beast. First of all, I'm going to put point number 1 on the screen for you, is that it is a kingdom. It is a nation. Now, why would we say that? Because a beast in Bible prophecy is a what? A kingdom, a nation. We saw that in Daniel 7 when we've studied previously. We studied about these 4 beasts. The lion, the bear, the leopard, and the terrible beast. Were all of these nations and kingdoms? Yes or no? Yes. So a beast is a kingdom. So we're looking at a nation. Point number 2. It arises around 1798. 538 to 1798, that was the deadly wound to one of its heads. We've talked about that. And as he that leadeth into captivity, look at verse 10, he that leadeth into captivity shall go into captivity. He that killeth with the sword must be killed by the sword, right? And then it says, here's the patience and faith of the saints. Verse 11, then I saw another beast coming up out of the earth. So at the time the first beast is going into captivity, the second beast is arising. So it arises around 1798. Now here's what John Wesley, the founder of the Methodist Church, had to say back in 1754. He's not yet come, speaking of the second beast, though he cannot be far off, for he's to appear at the end of the 42 months of the first beast. Pretty simple. Now, the beast rose up out of the what? Earth. The first beast rose up out of the what? Sea. What do waters represent in Bible prophecy? Revelation 17:15, then he said to me, the waters which you saw where the harlot sits are peoples, multitudes, nations, and tongues. Water represents multitudes of people. So beast arise up out of waters, that makes sense. Nations are formed from multitudes of people coming together. Is that correct? Makes sense. Now, with this beast came up out of the earth. Now, the sea, the earth, water, how does that all fit together? Somebody once said, well, hold on a second, preacher. It says the beast came up out of the sea, but here it says water. It doesn't say sea, it says water. What do you do with that? Go with me to Genesis chapter 1. That was a great question. I've now incorporated it into my meetings. We'll go to Genesis chapter 1, verses 9 and 10. Genesis chapter 1, verses 9 and 10. And it says this, Genesis 1, 9 and 10. And it says here, then God said, let the waters under the heavens be gathered together into one place, and let dry land appear, and it was so. Now Genesis 1 verse 10. And God called the dry land what? Earth. And the gathering together of the waters he called what? Seas. And God saw that it was good. Now notice that in Revelation 13, the first beast comes up from what's mentioned here, the sea, and the second beast comes up out of the what? Earth. These two things that are mentioned. At creation, God created a framework, and then in the first part of the week, in the second part of the week, he filled the framework. In fact, in creation, God had the sea, and then he brought creatures out of the sea, didn't he? And then God had the earth, and he brought creatures out of the earth. He made creatures that lived in the water, and he made creatures that lived in the land. Okay? Now, back to the book of Revelation. You'll want to mark Revelation 13 and stay there tonight, because that is the backbone of our presentation. In Genesis, God was playing a game of opposites, and that's one of the reasons it's interesting to see these terms used in Genesis. He wasn't playing a game, don't take me wrong, but it was a game of opposites just from the mental exercise we're going to do right now. It was darkness, and then he said, let there be what? Light. What's the opposite of darkness? Light, okay? And then it was wet, and he made it what? Dry. So, opposites. Now, as you look here, the sea or the waters are a multitude of people, a lot of people. What's the opposite of a lot of people? It's a few people. And so a beast would arise out of a sparsely populated area, okay? Now, as we move ahead here, we look at our next point. It arises a new baby nation. Where do we get that? Revelation 13:11. Are you reading there? It says, and I beheld another beast coming up out of the earth, having 2 horns like a what? Lamb. Now, some people say, well, it mentions lamb. That means that's Christian principles. Well, that'll be our next point. That is true. But it didn't say sheep. Jesus was led as a sheep to the slaughter, the Bible says. It could have used a sheep, but it used the baby version of the animal. All the other beasts of Bible prophecy, when they came on the world scene, were represented as full-grown animals. It didn't say a lion cub. It didn't say a bear cub. It said a lion, a bear. But here it didn't say a sheep. It said a lamb. It would be a new baby nation as it comes on the world scene. It would also have Christian principles. Okay? Why? Because it speaks as a lamb, or has 2 horns like a lamb, then it would speak as a dragon. Point number 6 is that it has no king as a democracy. What is missing on the horns of the second beast, those two lamb-like horns that were on the horns of the first beast in the same chapter? By way of strong contrast, it being in the same chapter, John is contrasting that one set of horns had something on them and the other simply does not. Crowns. Revelation 13 and verse 1, I stood up on the sand of the sea and saw a beast rise up out of the sea, having 7 heads and 10 horns, upon his horns 10 crowns. There's no crowns. Crowns are a fitting symbol of a monarchy and dictatorship. In fact, as you go over to Europe, Europe was an area, as you know, those 10 horns represent Europe. Europe was an area that was ruled by kingly authority, yes or no? But this would be one where the power would rest with the people. Democracy, just going with the Greek definition, in other words, by the people. Okay, now, as we move ahead here, would become corrupt. This power would speak as a what? Yeah, Revelation 13:11, I beheld another beast coming up out of the earth. He had 2 horns like a lamb, but he spoke as a dragon. So it would become corrupt. That shouldn't surprise you. This is a nation that is raised up by God on Christian principles, but ultimately it would become corrupted and speak as a dragon. Israel was a nation that was raised up by God, was it not? But was Israel corrupted? Yes or no? Yeah, so it shouldn't surprise you that the same thing would happen with another beast, a Bible prophecy, one that actually had Christian principles and that God was clearly establishing. Now, point number 8 is it would have worldwide influence. Where do we get that? The very next verse, Revelation 13 and verse 12. Revelation 13 and verse 12. See, the beautiful thing about where we're at in the prophecy seminar tonight is we have laid such a good foundation, like on the Vatican, the first beast of Revelation 13, and what things represent in Bible prophecy, like what a beast is and what water represents. We've studied that so thoroughly, for those of you that have been here every night, that we literally can break a prophecy like this down in 15 minutes. That's about how long we've been going right now, isn't it? And some of you, we're already to point number 8. We only have 8 points. And so we look here, Revelation 13 and verse 12. It says, "And he exercises all the authority of the first beast in his presence, and causes the earth and those who dwell in it to worship the first beast, whose deadly wound was healed." He exercises all the power of the first beast. Does the first beast have worldwide influence, yes or no? Yes, it does. And so it'll have global influence. Now, let's look here at this. You've got Revelation's land beast. It's a kingdom or a nation. It arises around 1798 out of a sparsely populated area as a new baby nation with Christian principles. Doesn't have a king, is a democracy, if you will, would become corrupt, and has worldwide influence. No one could reasonably apply John's prophetic clues to any other nation than our beloved United States of America. And yes, it is a nation that's already here because it must arise around 1798. That's right. Now, as we look here, also, it has to arise out of a sparsely populated area of the world, and unless Alaska is about to come on the world scene as a new superpower, or Antarctica, then we're pretty much, or the Amazon's going to come to life as a new nation to dominate the world. But those wouldn't arise around 1798, would they? And so, as we look here, our beloved nation that we cherish and love certainly has been raised up by God providentially right here in this prophecy. And for that we should celebrate and we should rejoice and we should be thankful. Can you say amen? America has been a shining light to a dark world in so many ways. But let's review the points. Does it meet point number 1? Is the United States a nation or a kingdom? Yes. Did it arise around 1798? Well, the Founding Fathers broke all ties with England in 1776 with the Declaration of Independence. By the way, the Vatican was losing its influence all during this time. It was declining. The U.S. was rising. It was overlapping there, okay? And then, of course, in March 1787, the Constitution was in 1787 the Constitution was framed. In March 1789, it went into effect, if I've got my dates right. And then George Washington served as our first president up until 1797, leading us to 1798. If I've got my dates right, I may be 1 or 2 years off. I need to do a little refresher from some of my notes on that problem. But something happened in 1798 that was rather significant. France sent ambassadors recognizing the United States as a nation. You see, you can pretend you're a country, go buy you 1,000 acres and call it the state of Bob if you want to, and unless you start stockpiling weapons, the FBI will leave you alone. But until other nations recognize you as a nation, you're just kind of pretending to have your own country, aren't you? 1798, the power that in prophecy removed the Pope from the Vatican, sent ambassadors that same year recognizing the U.S. as a nation, the first nation to recognize the United States as its own nation. Precisely the same year. So is that around 1798? That is 1798. Wow. Arises out of a sparsely populated area. Have you read about the adventures of Lewis and Clark? They could go for weeks at a time in North America and not run into another human being that wasn't part of their party. Sparsely populated area indeed. Okay? Look at the next one. Arises a new baby nation. Babylon, Medo-Persia, Greece, and Rome, all these had been existing cities, states that existed for hundreds of years before they come on the world scene as a world-dominating power. But the United States would come on the world scene while it was still relatively a new nation. In fact, Europe still considers us young today, do they not? Yes, they do. Christian principles. Now, there's a difference between America being a Christian nation, which it's not, and being founded on Christian principles, which it is. I'm not one that advocates, let's make America a Christian nation. Because majority rule. If you make America a Christian nation, the Vatican is the most influential Christian power in the United States. Yes or no? Yeah, you make America a quote-unquote officially a Christian nation, and you're going to have given its power and authority over to the beast. That's what you're going to have done. But the religious right among the Protestant world today doesn't realize that. They don't see that. There is a difference between having Christian principles of religious freedom and officially being a Christian nation. Over in Europe, did it work out real well when they officially made nations Protestant or they officially made nations Catholic? No, a bunch of people got killed. So I'm not an advocate of officially making it a Christian nation. I don't think you should coerce or force anybody in the way they worship. Can you say amen? The force and coercion of worship is something the beast power does. I don't think Christians ought to be emulating that. Now, it has no king as a democracy. Some people wanted to make George Washington a king, but he gave the authority of the Continental Army back over to Congress and went back to Mount Vernon. He didn't become a king. Then they elected him president, and he did what he needed to do for that. But my friends, we've never had a king. Can Germany say they've never had a king? Can England say they've never had a king? No. But America can say we've never had a king. Is a democracy. Some people say, yeah, but we're a constitutional republic, not a democracy. Guys, I'm simply using democracy in the term government by the people. Yes, we are a republic, and that's true. There's a way that you can tell that we're a republic. We have a representative government. That's why both Gore and Clinton won the popular vote, but Bush and Trump ended up becoming president. How can that happen? Because we're a republic. Okay, the whole electoral college system would only work in a republic. Our system with Congress, we're a republic. I use the term democracy, and by the way, I supplied the term democracy. We draw that from the fact that it doesn't have any crowns on its lamb like horns. So if you take issue with the word democracy, then erase the word democracy. The point being, we've never had a king. I use it loosely in the Greek definition, which simply means government by the people. Okay? And then would become corrupt. Do I really need to try to prove that one to you today? That morally speaking, America is not the nation it used to be? I mean, when TV first came out in America, you know, Beaver Cleaver's parents slept in separate beds so no one would get the wrong idea. Something changed since then. Right? Would have worldwide influence. I really do think that what's going on right now with the increase of our military and the promise to combat and eliminate off the face of the earth radical Islamic terrorism is going to play into the United States having military global influence. I believe we're right there, regardless of where you stand on the political issues. Okay? Now, as we look at these issues, that's clear. Now, let me show you this. Some people say, well, why is there a buffalo on the screen? Well, we needed a beast that had lamb-like horns but looked like it could speak like a dragon. A buffalo could, look that way. Somebody said, well, if John the Revelator had seen a buffalo, how might he describe it? I don't know, maybe a beast with lamb-like horns that would speak like a dragon. That would So I don't know that John saw a buffalo, but I do know that if there were ever any animal that would have represented this nation back before they committed genocide on the buffalo, that it indeed would have been the buffalo to represent North America. In fact, I put this on my Facebook page. This is a slide I built. By the way, if you haven't followed me on Facebook yet, you should. I have a Hiram Rester public figure page, and I'm always posting stuff like this. Like when they came out last year, May 13th, 2016, and made the bison the American mammal, I went ahead and put a little write-up from Revelation 13, 11, and 12. And I put the 8 points of Revelation's land beast, and I put the little article right there, and I posted it to my Facebook. So you know the seminar is going to come to an end, not next weekend, but the next, and it's going to be over. But if you want to get little updates as things come along and things I put out there, then follow the Hiram Rester public figure page on Facebook, and you'll be getting those. They'll pop up in your news feed. You go, oh, look at there, good deal. So yes, and so maybe that's we told the artist, look, we need an animal that has lamb-like horns and speaks like a dragon, and we ended up with a buffalo. So there it is. Now, we move ahead. One of the earliest goals, as President Reagan says, was to recognize the Vatican as a state and make them an ally. Now, I really liked Ronald Reagan a lot, and a lot of the things he did as president. He's probably my favorite president of modern times, but this was a major faux pas, and most people never understood that. In fact, he worked with the Vatican to fight communism, because the enemy of my enemy is my what? Friend. Communism and Catholicism are against each other. Why? Communism is atheistic. Right? Capitalism and communism are against each other, right? So they work together to bring about the demise of communism. But the Vatican's only a 110-acre nation. We'd never recognized the Vatican as a nation before. Why would you recognize someone's medium-sized... It is basically the size of a medium-sized farm in America. It's 110 acres. Why would you recognize that as a nation? It doesn't have that many citizens in it. It's the most powerful nation on the earth, though. The timing was calculated. The result is prophetic. On January 10, 1984, upon the orders of President Ronald Reagan and Pope John Paul II, full diplomatic relations were established between the United States and the Vatican. This cordial and cooperative framework did not always exist. In fact, it took 208 years for the United States to enter into full diplomatic relations with the oldest international personality in the community of nations. Now, as we look here, Time Magazine put out Holy Alliance, how Reagan and the Pope conspired to assist Poland's solidarity movement and to hasten the demise of communism. In fact, those two men, Reagan and John Paul II, died within just a few months of each other, did they not? And if you watch the news, as they talked about Reagan and his death, they talked about how he had worked with Pope John Paul to do this. And when John Paul passed in America, they talked about how he and Reagan had worked together to do this. It was big news. Okay? The wall comes down, Germany. The party's over. Poland, Soviet Union no longer exists, right? And then, of course, you look at the influence between the presidents and the popes here in the U.S. and Bush and Clinton and et cetera. The president and the Pope, Obama. And when Pope Benedict came to the United States a year and a half ago or so now, and he's actually invited to speak at a joint session of Congress. Does that not seem like a big deal to you? Do you invite, I don't know, the president of the Southern Baptist Convention to come and address a joint session of Congress? No. What are we doing with a head of state, religious leader, addressing a joint session of United States Congress? That's very weird, guys. That's unprecedented. Okay? It was a historic event, really, when you stop and think about it. Of course, right now, as we look at it, so far, Pope Francis and Donald Trump aren't getting along that well. But not everybody gets along with Donald Trump. Revelation 13:11. Then I saw, and yet at the same time, Donald Trump intends to increase America's military might and get involved in some things around the world when it comes to radical Islamic terrorism. And ultimately, whether it's with this Pope and this president or not, if the events of Daniel 11 play out the way we talked about the other night, eventually the Vatican, and the Vatican and the U.S. have really worked together very closely prior to Trump, yes or no? And one of the things I've noticed about Donald Trump is he has no problem absolutely ridiculing people and still being great buddies with them 2 or 3 weeks later. Just know that. Then I saw another beast coming up out of the earth, and he had 2 horns like a lamb and spoke like a dragon. Revelation 13 and verse 11. A nation speaks through its laws. The Bible predicts a coming confederacy of religions attempting to unite church and state. In Revelation 13, 16 through 18, and he causeth all, both small and great, rich and poor, free and bond, to receive a mark in their right hand or in their foreheads, and that no man might buy or sell, save he that had the mark or the name of the beast or the number of his name. Here is wisdom. Let him that hath the understanding count the number of the beast, for it is the number of a man, and his number is what? 666. My friends, we're coming to where there's going to be a time of trouble such as there's never been, and people won't be able to buy or sell. That's going to be the tribulation. The tribulation is coming, my friends. Next weekend, starting on Thursday night, we begin what? Tribulation weekend, with the rapture and the forbidden prophecy. And at that time shall Michael stand up, the great prince, which standeth for the children of thy people, and there shall be a time of trouble such as never was since there was a nation, even at that same time. And in that time thy people shall be delivered, every one that shall be found written in the book. Daniel 12:1. A time of trouble such as there's never been. What's another term for that? The tribulation. Next weekend is what? Tribulation weekend. We start what night? Thursday. What topic? The rapture. For tribulation weekend. Good guess, though. I mean, that was pretty good. You guys have it down. At least you know we're doing something next weekend. And it'll be good. You ought to come. But guys, as we look at America's role in prophecy, some people see America as it's going to become the muscle for the final events. For the final events of Earth's history, America is going to become the world's last superpower. I mean, some people say, what about China? Guys, China is in a mess. China is declining right now. Do you not realize that? They would have you think they're getting better, but they've been doing the one-child policy. For one child, they have 2 parents and 4 grandparents and 8 grandparents, great-grandparents. They, as the present generations retire in China, they're going to have 1 person in the workforce for every 6 to 8 people in retirement. They're in a mess. They just took away their one-child policy. China, give them 15, 20 years. Should the world stand that long, China is going to start tanking. Their population is really messed up. In addition to that, they have a serious, among those people that are childbearing age, they have a serious lack of females to do it. Because when families were only able to have 1 child with the Asian culture, they were making sure it was a boy. That's right. And so, there's some problems. I'm not picking on the Chinese people. God loves them as much as anybody, and we should too. What I'm pointing out is world superpowers, regardless of how you think things are going to go down, the Bible prophecy reveals this second beast of Revelation 13 is going to become the dominant world superpower. And it's going to speak as a dragon. Some people say, well, that's it. I'm moving to Mexico. I'm out of here. Well, that's kind of a turnabout, isn't it? No, guys, you understand that this nation is going to be the greatest place to be on earth, probably right up until it's not. But when it's not going to be good to be anywhere, is it? Because even though the mark of the beast will be enforced right here in Washington State, it's going to be enforced in Saudi Arabia and in Mexico and everywhere else, yes or no? Ultimately, all the world's going to wonder after the beast. So don't lament, oh, I can't believe America's going to follow the beast. Come on. You knew when you walked in here, all the world's going to wonder after the beast in the end. Yes or no? So put your eyes on Jesus. Realize there's a time of trouble coming. It's called tribulation. We're going to study that next weekend. And keep your eyes on the Lord.